I think it's been a long time coming to start with. I think the plans have been there in principle for several years now, and it's something we've always felt we've been working towards, but something we feel is now achievable. And it's achievable for the right reasons in terms of the income the club have generated over a number of seasons, but also the reasons behind why we need or why we want the new buildings and the new facilities. A lot of investment has gone into the stadium and the pitches alongside that and the pitches outside here to get them to a certain level which justifies our position in the football pyramid, and now we need the buildings to go alongside that. And there's a reason why we keep saying we need the buildings. It's what we can provide for the players, not only first team players but academy players as well, and then the community on the back of that. So lots of areas we're looking to address, but anyone who's spent any time at the Cliff Hill training ground will justify how difficult it is to be a functional working environment in these buildings. It's where they spend their working life as a professional footballer at XSC. So it's where we train all the time. It's where we've got all our facilities. It's where the coaches spend all the time, myself included, and the academy as well. So in terms of where a football player spends most of the time whilst playing for XSC, is at the training ground. And even whilst they're at the training ground, only a certain amount of time is spent out on the pitches. There's other areas to train, whether that's the brain or the body, and not only areas to train but areas to improve. We speak about S&C and gym related activities, rehab from injuries, recovery after games, preparation in terms of what's next, which in terms of the demands putting on the body. So there's various aspects of being a professional footballer which can be improved, and we feel we facilitate pretty well here, but we have to not cut corners, but we have to work a certain way. And maybe the pandemic's shone a greater light on the importance of the social aspect of football as well.
And one thing that's evident is lack of space, I think, isn't it? I mean, players eat in the same place that they have to work out. And
yeah, look, that's been a long-standing issue. First of all, we don't provide the players with food. A separate company delivers microwave meals, which is not ideal for professional footballers. We want to get it to a position where we can provide them with a proper breakfast, or the option of a proper breakfast, and then feed them after training. And in order to do that, you need a canteen and a working kitchen. Unfortunately, at the moment, our canteen is our gym area, so it very much balances between the two, and the gym's in a position where it needs to be improved dramatically, space-wise, but also equipment-wise as well. And in order to that, you need a little bit of investment, and you need a proper gym as a one which has been put together over the years, and various bits of equipment, thankfully added over the years because it's much needed, but it's always been added on top of it, and there's not really enough space. And it's not only ourselves, because obviously we're generally in the gym canteen as it's known, but the academy use the porta cabins outside, which certainly aren't ideal.
With winter on the way, it's where these issues are probably highlighted a bit more. You know, you showed me some areas where you've had leaks, and the damage gets worse, I guess, as you get wetter and colder.
The leaks are constant. Like you say, when the tough weather comes, the leaks become more and more apparent. But holes can be blocked. It's generally the way the building's set out, and how functional it is. The kit room is what it is. We've got Sue and Sam working in there at the moment, and they're working together. But similar to the provision of not providing food for the players, we don't wash their kit at the moment as well. So all things which most football clubs probably take for granted, and the provision provided by most professional football clubs, not only at our level but at levels below ourselves, we can't quite manage here at XSC, and that's due to whatever reason, but that's certainly something we're looking forward to being able to do and to provide for the players. So many provisions we can improve with a new training building, not a new training ground but a new training building. It just allows us to become a better operating service for the players.
You said in the past as well, getting players down here sometimes can be quite a challenge. I mean, the facilities in terms of pitch and everything speak for themselves, but if you had this improved facility, that can only help to encourage maybe some players to see us as an option.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because when you bring players down, they are impressed with the pitches, they're impressed with the stadium, they're impressed with the space and the size of the area we've got here. But then, you know, we are cutting corners with the buildings. And like I say, when the players are only spending a certain amount of time on the grass, they're spending the rest of the time inside these buildings. And like you touched upon, as winter approaches, there'll be more close, confined spaces really, which isn't ideal. We need more space and we need more facilities to keep them not occupied, but to keep them working. You know, they don't just come in, they train and have their food and then go again. They keep working for several hours throughout the day to make themselves better players and to make us a better team. And you know, it's not just ourselves, that's the academy as well, and maybe more importantly within the academy, because they're still developing. They're not as senior in terms of their age and their bodies, so a lot more investment is spent in terms of getting them to the players they need to be.
As you alluded to earlier as well, this is something that's been in development for a long time, so you know everything's been factored in here. It's not a rush decision.
Oh, it's certainly not a rush decision. I think I've seen so many plans over my time as manager, and even before that as coach. You know, I remember speaking openly with Paul, and he spoke about his hopes and expectations of a new training building, and the plans have changed slightly and altered, and obviously the pandemic has had a huge effect on the market and the cost of this sort of project, I suppose, which is a real shame, but you know, we couldn't predict that, and we're just reacting off the back of it. But hopefully that hasn't delayed what's going to happen next, and that's more and more investment into what is already a well-functioning team. You think about the income that the club's created from generating from player sales over a long period of time. There's no reason why that can't increase over the years, with more investment in the playing side of it.
To those trust members who are maybe a little bit on the fence, I think this highlights just how strong a club we are, that we can do things like this, you know, with fans as the owners, and give them the opportunity to have their say on it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're all aware that this is not a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but it's coming around off the back of the Ollie Watkins windfall, which is a great story because he's one of our own. He's gone on to play in the Premier League, gone on to play international football, and that all started with ourselves. And his pathway, that everyone knows it, that experience he had here, it was second to none. And the fact that this has brought this opportunity around cannot be underestimated. And anyone who's got not any questions, but any understanding of what it's like to be a professional footballer, think about this place as their workplace, if that makes sense, whether that's an office, a school, a library, wherever that may be, might be outdoor work. Where you're spending most amount of time needs to be a functional working environment, and we've not made do, but we've made the best out of this facility, and that's not just myself, that's the group of staff and the players, and staff and players previously, and we'll continue to do so for however long that needs. But we feel this investment is going to be really one which pushes the clubs to a new level.
So good morning. Thank you all for coming along. If you came last week to the AGM, welcome back. If you're new, nice to see you, and nice for the event to be supported. In case you thought you'd come into the wrong auditorium, this isn't a Boys Own concert. But I hear they do a good song and dance, so we'll see how that goes. After the AGM last week, I went outside to the bar and I chatted to a few people, and they told me about events about 20 years ago when an Exeter City supporters work party went to the Clifford Hill and done a whole load of work on the pavilion, and there were stories of people stood on the roof tearing up carpets, cleaning the showers, which by all accounts wasn't a particularly pleasant experience. I don't think health and safety featured particularly highly in the plans, but they kept the club going. And it's amazing, isn't it, that 20 years later, we're sat here and we're canvassing our members on the potential to spend £2 million on that same building, on a replacement building. So it's a testament to those people, those work parties who've done all the work that they did, to the people who started the trust and who have kept it going all this time, that we can be here today and be taking this vote, and a testament as well to the business and the people like Julian who have carried us on this journey. So thank you to all of you who have been involved for that many years. It's absolutely fantastic, and it's a real privilege for me to be stood here saying the things that I am. We are, about 4 years ago, I was privileged to be in a club board meeting that was held at the Clifford Hill. We had the board meeting in a shed. It can't be described as very much more than that. And of course it was a ruse to demonstrate to us how poor the the facilities were out there. There was a sort of small stringed orchestra outside playing extremely sad music and really pouring the guilt onto us. I mean, immediately it was pretty bad. We had rain coming through the ceiling in the showers, around electrical appliances, there were rotting pieces of wall. So we released some money to make those repairs, but it really started the ball rolling. There were already plans to replace the building, but it really set the urgency of it in our minds very solidly. So we're here today because the wisdom of Aston Villa and Brentford, but let's not, the number of times I get asked, what happens to all the transfer money? Well, in 12 months' time, hopefully, we'll be able to point to a building at the Clifford Hill and say, that's where it's gone, that's where it is. It's the real tangible asset that we can point to. I think that's really important. I'm going to introduce you now to our panel of experts, or that's what they're calling themselves anyway. They're going to start with a song called This Old House. I'll start right at the end. I'm sure most of you know David Lee, and next to David is Mike Phillips, and they were both largely responsible for the building of the grandstand, the new grandstand, and the away end, so we're in very, very capable hands. Next to Mike is Chris from NPS Southwest, and he'll be managing the construction. Tell me, gents, if I'm saying anything incorrect here, but Chris's firm will be managing the actual construction and has managed the tendering process. The bloke in the middle here has just wandered in off the street, so I don't need to introduce Julian. And I'm sure you all remember Keith from last week, our finance director, who's here to answer any questions on finance. So I'm going to hand over to one of the technical guys, Chris, I think, he's going to walk you through what it is that we're intending to build.
Thank you, Nick. So what I thought I'd do is walk you through the plans. So this is the training pitch side. This is the car park side of the Cliff Hill. Some of the areas, and Matt touched on in the video, some of the areas where we've got improvement is around an increased size of a gym. So the gym is now a gym only, and it's about 110 square meters, as opposed to the existing space, which is nearer to 70. So, big improvement in the size of the gym. That reflects the way football perhaps has changed in terms of fitness, and that's come out of, well, the whole project has really come out of a long briefing process with the club, through the managers and the coaching staff, to arrive at the point. There's been a number of iterations of the plan, as you might expect, as the design developed, to the point that we've fixed the layout now, as shown here. The building is a two-storey building as opposed to a single-storey building. Obviously, it's got circulation staircase, a lift. We've got a separate coaches changing area, something they're basically in a cupboard pretty much at the moment. We've got an improvement on the first team changing and showers areas with the toilets off of that space, and also a separate shower area. There's only a single shower area at the moment within the building, which is used by the young professionals with their own changings and toilets as well. The kind of back of house laundry facility is in this corner. I think you can see from the video that the guys work really hard with the space they've got. It is congested. It's probably not an ideal working environment the way it's laid out. So as part of the design, we've tried to rationalise the space to get much better use of the space we got available. Things like a practical point of view, the kit goes out in skips to the away games. That's near the front of the car park. So that makes the movement of the kit to games much, much easier. This space in here is for the physiotherapy. That's increased by probably about 30%. Obviously, there's more. They're in a very small space at the moment, and we're able to get three treatment areas there for obviously the players recovering. The usual sort of toilet provision for people visiting the building, and this kind of controlled lobby approach as well, so we've got some sense of security before people go up to the first floor. It'd be worth pointing out just this red dotted line here represents the existing pavilion. So you'll notice that so the new build is being built behind it, in a sense, between the existing pavilion and some of the training areas. Pitch 1 is here. And the idea, the way it's going to be built, is this will be constructed and then this will be demolished. So from a continuity point of view, the club are continuing to able to train and use the facilities with as little disruption as possible. So it's been purposely phased in that way to have the minimal impact on the day-to-day running of the club. As you'll be aware, the building is constructed using off-site construction. It's now referred to as modern methods of construction, and effectively this is a sectional building. I think it's 22 separate bays, which you'll see they work on these grid lines. Obviously, 11 at the first ground floor, 11 at the first floor. All right, to go on to the next slide, Nick. Thanks, Nick. So coming up the staircase now, as Matt said in his presentation, we've now got a separate dining kitchen function. Currently, as he said, it doubles up with the gym and clearly doesn't work effectively. So you can see an idea just from the table layouts that we can easily cater for all the first team players. The kitchen, I think, is something like 20 square meters larger than the existing arrangement, which probably in scale is about that big. So you can see we've got a much bigger space to enable the preparation of proper meals for the players. A seating area here, and we have got sliding doors onto a balcony which overlooks the pitch. So that's an area that can be used in the summer. So the pitch 1 is up here, training pitch 1. Small offices at the top of the stairs. An area we've added, it's been added in as part of the design, is what we call a theatre. So at the moment, if they want to do game analysis, they do that out of a very small porter cabin, very narrow and really difficult to fit the number of players in. So now we've got this space which actually does double up and can be used as a multi-use space by the academy or meetings, etc., etc. But this is a space where they will be doing game analysis, whole team briefing in a comfortable way. The rooms at the end are designated for the academy, so this corner running around here. So the academy coaches would be in these spaces. Interview rooms, so obviously the ability to have interviews with players, more small meeting spaces. Female changing space upstairs that's not currently within the existing provision. So for women's football, there is a shower, a change area, and obviously their own toilets within that space. Club secretary's office, and this bit in this section is basically the coach's manager's suite. This space here is Matt Taylor's office, a waiting area for any visitors that come up, so they can come up through a secure lobby, wait, small kitchenette, and then the first team coaching staff, and then off of that, individual interview rooms. So a lot of the work around individual discussions with players will be taken in here, individual meetings as well. I think that probably picks up most of the spaces. Nick, if you've got the next slide, it's probably something. So this is, I'm not apologise for the level of detail. These are planning stage drawings. So these are the drawings that were submitted for the planning application. So you get an idea of what the building's going to look like. 2-story. It's obviously a rectangular building, so it's designed in that way to make it as economic as possible. This shows the context of the existing academy building, so you can see the gap between the two buildings here. This is what it looks on the end elevation and the context of the site levels. The other slide, Nick. This is the elevation from the front. It's a clad building. Obviously, you can see where the windows are, the entrance doors, the balcony area here. It's got a brick plinth up to a certain height, and then clad above there. Give you some idea of context of the size. This is the existing pavilions here, the two-story academy building. Okay, the other one, Nick. So again, there's quite a lot of detail on this drawing, but effectively, this is the footprint of the new building, to give you some idea of scale. and the existing building is this red line that runs around here. So the idea, as I explained earlier, is to construct the new building, demolish the old building, and then the space that the footprint of the old building will become some extra car parking spaces, 5 or 6 car parking spaces there. I think that's okay. Nick, do you want the images? I don't know if you want to see the images of the... So this is a CGI generated image that we used at the early planning stages. It's the final design building that went into planning is not exactly the same as this, but it's pretty close. This shows what we call phase 2. So this would be the next phase, potentially the academy accommodation. That doesn't form part of the project that we're currently looking at, but we have secured planning consent for that as part of the overall development. That was a conscious and instructed plan at the start of the process, was to ensure we had planning consent for all the phases in one go.
Staffing from upstairs will be across in the big building. That's just the youngsters for Saturdays and Sundays, which is the last piece of the puzzle eventually.
That's correct,
So
Julian, yeah.
It's not the whole.
So the staff that are currently within the building will move across into the new building. And again, this shows the image from the front car park. This is phase 2. Obviously, this is the new build. It's slightly different on the plans. We don't have the recess this side. It's now on the back face looking over the pitches. So hopefully that's helpful and explains what we're trying to achieve. Nick, what do you want to go into next?
Sorry,
So after all of that explanation, what we really want, I mean, today is really about you coming and asking questions and satisfying yourselves. This is a worthy thing to do. When I look at pictures and plans, I can't look at them and think that's £2 million worth of work, but I'm absolutely certain it is. And these guys have put huge amounts of work into getting the right building for the right price. But hopefully you're all brimming with questions that you want to ask. We've got the people here who can answer pretty much anything. And if they can't, then I'll ask Julian to answer it. So, any questions on what you've seen? Whoever's got the microphone over here? You do.
This is aimed at David, I think. Are you thinking about ground source heating, David?
Sorry, what was that? Sorry?
Are you thinking about ground source heating before you build?
Yeah. So to answer the question, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
The technical solution is we're using air source heat pumps, which function through then units sited in the individual spaces. So there's no mains gas to the site at all. I know that wasn't your question. So we've got to run the system off an electrical supply. So that's the proposed heating system. We didn't look in detail at ground source heat pump. In my personal experience, it does get expensive from other developments, and obviously we have been overall trying to manage the whole project to a budget. I think we've got a reasonable level of energy efficiency in the building. Obviously it complies with building regulations, and it's building regulations plus from an insulation standard.
There's just one other request, really. Before you knock the building down, if there's anything of historical importance.
We've already covered that.
Well, I promise you I've mentioned it first thing this morning.
It's the first thing you said to us when we arrived.
Any other questions? Nigel? Sorry, can you just... So we got the...
Yeah. Can I ask the guys who negotiated the contract, what due diligence we've done or are going to do on the preferred contractor? Their latest set of accounts, which are to October 2020, show £1 million owing and a roughly similar amount in creditors. And the biggest risk in any major building project is the contractor defaulting because one of their customers goes bust. So can we be reassured on that point?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Yes, we have done some due diligence on them. We've obviously done credit checks, but they don't tell us a great deal, not much more than you found out from the web. But we are looking at getting a performance bond within the contract, which will cover us for about 10% of any risk there might be. We also have within the contract other things like vesting of the individual stages of the contract. So they'll manufacture a unit, we'll get that vested, and we won't pay for that until it's vested, which in effect means we own it. There's still a risk. If they went part way through the contract, we'd have half of the things built, but we do feel that once the modules are built, we certainly have an opportunity to get local subcontractors to complete the contract. Have I missed anything, David?
Well, yeah, just to expand on that a little, the off-site construction of the building itself, which was obviously built in a factory, is about £500,000 of the 2 million. As Keith says, we will get a vesting certificate for that and will not pay for it until the certificate is in place. In total, there's about £1 million of the 2 million is either wholly off-site or largely off-site, and we will get as much of that vested as we can. So in the event that a failure happened during that period, then those units, we are the legal owners of those units. So that would leave us, if we got to that state, and I'm sure we won't, it would leave us with the subcontract work that's actually done on site. All that could be done with local subcontractors, and we could manage that. We could get through it if we needed to get through it. And because we will have a performance bond, we will have 10% of the contract value, which will help us sort that out if we need to sort it out. So I'm confident that the way we've set it up, because it is a modular build contract, that we are not exposing the club to any undue risk.
Anybody else? Sarah, down the front here.
A couple of questions from me. Just for clarity then, the picture we're looking at here, where it says welcome, that bit to the left of there won't exist in phase one, is that correct? So the porter cabins that are there at the moment will stay as they are?
Correct, including the link as well, that link the two buildings together. That will be in the next phase.
Okay.
So where the word welcome is, that's a link building between the building we're proposing and the rest of the academy changing room accommodation.
Okay. How are we in terms of the lease on the grounds? What's our security on that in terms of period of time? How long have we got there?
We've been working very closely for a long, long time with a gentleman called Paul Wright. Paul is Clifford Hill's representative, or now, of course, his wife, not Clifford. Andrew Rothwell is a member on the board and has been dealing with that. And at every stage of this, since even back to 2014 when Mike started this, we've been engaged with him, and he is prepared to give us the 25 years that we need as literally on the same day as we need to start the work. So that's been timed to come into play literally as we sign the contract. So we're in very good space anyway because we've been there for so long. Paul's very, very friendly towards the club. He's very often upstairs with us, and that's not going to be an issue, but it is an important point that you raise.
Any other questions? Sir.
Apologies for going back to what was said behind. Have we also looked, apart from heating, at solar and wind?
In terms of solar, there is a likelihood we'll end up with some element of PV on the roof as part of the modelling. So without giving, not going into too much detail, it's a design and build contract. So the contractor takes the design forward from planning into detailed design, and part of that is nowadays it will be the thermal modelling of the building. There's various ways you can solve the thermal modelling, is whether you've got more mass in terms of insulation, where you've got an element of renewables. So I think it's reasonable to say at this stage the element of renewables will be about the level we need to deliver the project, rather than making the building a generating building. So I can't say here and now it will definitely have PV on the roof, but my personal feelings as we go through the design, that might be likely. That's quite commonly the solution with the way the standards are now set in terms of energy modelling for buildings. It would have also obviously things like low energy lighting, controls in terms of occupancy, absence detection. So we're trying to make the building as thermally efficient as it can be, to not lose any heat, as airtight as it can be, so again it doesn't lose any heat, and an appropriate level of technology to make it compliant, but also to reduce the revenue costs. At the moment, the existing pavilion is uninsulated, so if you spotted the pictures in the external walls, there is no insulation at all. So the baseline, and I don't know what the revenue costs to run the building, but they must be very, very high on the current building we've got.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether if we could put solar panels on, whether there would be an opportunity there. I mean, I deal with a guy who's done this up in Surrey for a couple of clubs up there, and his estimate is roughly between 350 and 450 per panel, and about 60 panels for that sort of area. And then if it was say 400, 425, maybe fans groups could sponsor at least half of them. I mean, I know who I speak for would be prepared to put a couple or three in. It's just an idea anyway.
Yeah.
I think if this project kicks off, I think I think it highly likely that once it's complete, there'll be a lot of opportunity for fan engagement and for contributions, whether that's to replacing existing equipment that at the moment we're intending to use, or indeed for the solar paneling that you're talking about. So there'll be plenty of those opportunities, I'm certain. Any further questions? Nigel.
It goes on a bit from what you just said, Nick. Matt in his presentation mentioned needing a fully equipped kitchen and a state-of-the-art gym, and the FAQ on the Trust website refer to fixtures built into the fabric of the building, but there will obviously be a lot of equipment that will be needed. It's no good having a state-of-the-art building and nothing to put in it. So have we costed out the equipment we need, and how will that be paid for?
I can take the gym one if you want to do that. So gym-wise, we've there's already been some fundraising gone on there. We've got more than adequate, up-to-date equipment that we can certainly manage with now, and is good enough. But the area they're doing it in is quite ridiculous. Not even enough room for all the boys there in the morning. They have to sort of almost take turns or second sessions. So we certainly have enough of the very expensive gym equipment we bought probably about 2 years ago from a contact, an ex-student of mine actually, but I think the money was raised externally. In terms of the kitchen, then we will have to do that. You know, that's not something we put in. You know, you could go on forever. It's the same. We're going to have to use all the facilities that we got. We're going to have to use what we've done for probably about 18 or 19 years, probably a bit longer to my knowledge, to actually equip some of this thing. So yes, I think Nick's point is that we are going to be, in a way, over a period of time, which has always happened at this club, relying on the help that we've always had. So it's a good point that you raise. I don't think we've covered everything we couldn't, but that you have to start with the outside of the building. But we have got enough to be carrying on with almost immediately, except the kitchen will be something that we'll have to look at quite quickly.
It may be worth adding on the gym that we did quite a big session with the strength and conditioning coach. So the layouts that you are shown on the floor plans, they're actually laid out as the strength and conditioning coach would want them. And actually the additional equipment here and now, it could be reasonably limited. There's some wall bars that they need to put in. So there are some elements that need to go in. But it's not just a blank canvas. So some of the machinery they've already got and some of the fitness machinery is adequate and will be reused in the proposed gym.
Some of it is in two sites because it's not big. One is in an old porter cabin which the youngsters use, but put it all in one place. We have, as Chris says, we've got enough to certainly keep us going well for a while. But like everything, you will want to upgrade and improve as we go forwards.
Comments? Questions?
Hello. Oh, yes. So those of you who know me you've all probably had an appeal from me for money for the club for the pitch or stars for the academy. I've already put my hand up as the kitchen monitor, so don't worry. we will do it together.
We're so confident about Elaine's money-raising expertise that we've already ordered all the equipment. We better deliver it now.
Hi, can I just ask a question around the trust loan element of this, and if you can do a noddy explanation of the up to 600,000 and how you've got to that and how likely it's going to be 600,000, or just a simple explanation for a simple person as to how you've got to that figure.
So you know that the trust asked the club to maintain a strategic reserve of is it 500,000 or 6 now?
I think it's 6.
It's £600,000, which basically covers a couple of months' salaries. So the club can keep going. If we had to close down for whatever reason, the club could keep going for 2 months. So the loan was really to ensure that at no point did we go below that £600,000. So that it's not certain that we'll need a loan. We know that there are funds coming in all the time, but to be cautious, we've really erred on the side of let's expect nothing and work from that position upwards. So it may well be that there isn't the need for a loan at all. There may well be that the loan is much smaller than 600,000. But the 600,000 on the figures that Keith and the board put together ensured that we didn't drop below that strategic level. So that's really all there was to it. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that's great, thank you. So the pinch point is summer 2022 when that's most likely, if at all.
If there's going to be one, that's where it would be.
Yes, that's right.
That's lovely, thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Trying to save the microphone travelling too far. I think I read, I may be wrong, that there was 2 to 4% potential inflation allowed in the project for increased costs. I may have read that wrongly. I think material costs are inflating hugely at the moment. I wondered when the tenders went out, the price came back in, and whether anybody thinks the cost is likely to overrun by more than 2 to 4%.
Yeah, so I'll take that one. So the job went out on a competitive tender, and at the moment we've got a fixed price acceptable to a point in time to let the contract. Within that fixed price, the contractor has made an allowance for inflation over the life of the project, and that's a capped inflation allowance. So actually, from the club's point of view, it's a stated number. If material prices do not total and hit that total, the contractor's carrying that risk. So in effect, the club has got a capped figure of inflation that might occur, so that's stated within the contract. There's another element around 2 particular elements to the build, which is the steel price and the external cladding cost, which they have caveated their fixed price on the basis that they may increase. But you're looking at reasonably de minimis numbers, in the low thousands. So it's not a huge risk. But because at the point the contracts were going through, those were the things that were the most volatile in the construction market for them. It's obviously a lot of steel in the building. It's an off-site constructed, and as you could see from the elevational treatment, there's quite a lot of external cladding to the building as well. So there's two parts to answer that question. But I think the club's position is the risk is covered within the contract, fairly to both parties. Importantly, it's a capped risk to the club. So the contractors, that's the offer, that's the basis of the contract. So escalation above the inflation is covered, basically.
Can I ask one more as well?
Of course.
Going back to the lease, 25 years, I think, was the answer. Is there any ability to extend beyond 25 years? Because that sounds quite near to now. And also, what's the expected lifespan of the building in the design?
Lifespan?
I'll take the first one. It's a design life of 50 years, and we'd expect, and what that really means in the industry terms, that would include component replacement. So some elements won't last 50 years because they wear and tear, but the structure of the building is designed for a minimum of 50 years, and we'd expect it to outstrip that anyway. But that is the design life specified within the documentation.
In terms of our security of tenure, in a way, we don't even need. The advice is, of course, you wouldn't take that. That we don't need any further lease because the security of tenure, because we've been so long. But it's just a sensible thing. It's a figure that they're very comfortable with, and I think it's something that we will renew on a regular basis if we need. Bearing in mind that we don't actually need to. The fact is, we should for the reasons that you're talking about. So I can certainly speak to Paul about that. But 25 is something we agreed right at the very beginning when we actually finally got him to give us that lease. At that point, we were thinking that there might be some finance from outside, some fundraising from outside, at which case you would have had to have the 25 years. Yeah. That's really what it came from. So this is just an extra insurance policy. Do we need it? Do we not? I'm advised that we don't, but it's still a sensible thing to do, and certainly the trust membership would want that to be done, at least that number. But that's it's ongoing, if you like.
Anybody else? Martin.
Thanks very much for the presentation, really interesting and very encouraging. I just wondered about the phase 2, and did the board give any consideration to doing all this in one phase? I wondered what the economies of scale of doing that was, and what flexibility there was. Should there be quite a new injection of money into the club fairly soon, is it possible that the whole thing could be done in one go? Would that be financially advantageous to have a one-hit project rather than 2 phases?
Just from a practical point of view, if you split a contract into 2, you tend to pay more for the 2 separate parts in terms of the contractor's preliminary costs, because they have to set up site, go away, come back, set up site again. So just in simple economics, it's always more expensive to build 2 things separately than one thing together. In terms of the next phase,
in terms of the utilities and everything that we're going to put in place, the second phase will be much easier, because you're actually going to do, that was always the plan, to put in, the power, the water, etc. will all be there because it has to be. So that really expensive part was a lot of the money, if somebody wants to say, a lot of the money is in the ground there. So that will be certainly a starting point, will be advantageous. But Chris is quite right. You would, if you could, do the whole thing, but we have to take the steps that we're taking. And that facility is something that we will want to do in time. I would certainly be on the march with you, Martin, if that money did become available. But I think, like we've always done, we have to, do it in manageable, bite-sized chunks. And this is a pretty big bite we're taking here. So, yeah, I would like to do it with you, but the finance at this point, particularly because everything's risen so much in that period of time, then it's probably not sensible to take that leap, even though it might in the long run cost us more. But who knows, if something happens, then I think that would be, the board is very much has this on the table as something they want to complete.
I think the truth of the matter is that if £1 million turned up in the next 3 or 4 weeks, assuming that we get approval to go ahead with this project before we sign the contract, we could probably do something about it. Once we get past that point, I think realistically we'd have to say then it becomes the second phase of a contract that's already been let. I'm sure we'd have a contractor who'd be very interested in talking to us about it. I mean, they are aware when they price that there are potentially other phases. And like all contractors, they always look very positively and think that's something we'll win this one, and then we'll be in a good position for any other phases that came. So I'm sure we'd have a willing partner if we did suddenly have some additional money and wanted to carry on.
I think it's worth saying, Martin, that from the earliest days, we've always planned that the project was a whole project. That's why we went for planning permission for the whole project. And it would have been really exciting to be done the whole thing. But when we reached the idea of budgetary provision, we sought budget prices from people in the trade to see what we could or couldn't afford. And in the end, what we found was that phase one was the likeliest deliverable thing with the money which is available at this point in time, but we are planning and always will plan to go on and get phases 2 and 3 done. It's always been the intention.
I just wondered, in terms of the vision for the Cliff Hill, what thoughts are being given to spectator facilities? A lot of training grounds now have, stands where people can watch youth games, ladies' games, whatever. I just wondered if any thoughts being given to making it a hub where people can actually go and watch games in the dry.
There's a couple of things. The last couple of weekends I've been out there, and there's been small tournaments, been hugely successful. They've attracted huge numbers, as you say, Martin, more than I've seen before. The car parking area, which is now absolutely huge, is packed. We have a very nice catering facility down there, which we're in the middle of actually some work going on so that we can have some professional people in there so that we can maximise that opportunity. That's literally, right in the middle of what we're doing. I've looked at something like bleachers in the first instance down one side, and it is now becoming an issue that we need to look at. And it certainly sprang to mind. And at the moment, we've got so much on our plate. Sometimes, you can dissipate looking at too many things. But I do look and see whether I can find in the Exeter City way, if you like, if Barnet were going to sell something. But if it's something smaller in the first instance, but that's for another phase and for later. But it is now becoming a problem because we are attracting a lot of people. We have got big numbers out there. We have got a facility that will take those numbers as well. So therefore, and that's what's making us so as successful as we are. So yes, you're right. We still do need to look at it. I think the first instance is bleachers and seats and so on. And the second one is one I've already mentioned that we're already on the case of, making that much more comfortable when they arrive and also making some profit from it too. So, the last couple of weekends, I've been going out there Saturdays and Sundays to see see the coaches really rather than the players. That's what I'm most interested in. But then looking at the other things that are going wrong, my mind immediately is going to that. So at the moment, we've got a pretty big project on our hands, but don't think for a moment that's not going on alongside at the moment. And you're correct. We do need to do something about that. And I don't think it's big money to do it, and we might be able to do it. We might be able to raise some of that money from what we're thinking about now, which is not very far away. We have to do that pretty quickly, actually, because I was slightly embarrassed, well, not slightly, more than embarrassed, that we weren't being more professional to look after those people that have travelled a long way.
Thank you. What's the current state of the relationship with East Devon District Council?
All the connections that I have, the leader was supposed to have been with us last week and didn't come at the last minute for some reason. I'm not quite sure why, but as far as I understand it, the relationship we have with him is excellent. The same as it is with Exeter City Council. The relationship that the club has in both of those areas is, I would say, exceptional, and they were very, very helpful. A couple of times we had some problems. We called on a couple of people to come and help us, to give us some advice. Yeah, very, very, very proactive and very positive. There was no problems at all with not only that building, I think, although Mike and Chris had to do some work.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
We're certainly, before we put in our various planning application, we had no problem in getting officers from the district council to come and meet us on site and talk about the things that they saw there might be problems in the application being made, so that we could adjust the application accordingly, so that it didn't hit them blind immediately, we would get a bad reaction. We tried to get rid of all of that right from the beginning, and they were amazingly cooperative.
David, is there something you're worried about?
No, just...
Okay, I just wondered why the...
Well, you will be aware of when we took the club over nearly 20 years ago, the relationship with East Devon District Council was very difficult.
Was very?
Difficult.
Oh, well, I would say by comparison now it's exceptional. We had the previous leader would come in regularly to the football. This one was going to come last week, didn't, but it's coming next week. And he was coming in with Mr. Bialek, with Phil. They're very, very positive towards what's going on across the club as a whole because of its membership, because of what it's doing in all areas of the community. And we do a massive amount of work in the East Devon area. We call it Greater Exeter now because people don't see East Devon as separate. It's greater. So I think, and they're very, very aware. I've done presentations down there to the whole of the council down there, and so is Jamie. They're very aware of what this club is doing for that area, and I think it's massively positive in both here and Exeter as well. And that's what the club has done since you quite rightly say from back in those days. We've changed that dramatically.
I think what's worth adding to that, and certainly the interactions I've had with the councils, and David, you're from your time onwards, it's been noticeable, I think, that people recognise our ownership model, and so we're a fairly safe pair of hands to deal with. It's not like you're dealing with a multi-millionaire who's got to run riot with dodgy plans or making life difficult for the council. So I think Julian puts in a huge amount of work working with these guys, but I think as well it's the nature of our model that makes us low risk and a safe pair of hands.
The floor diagram for the top floor of phase 1 shows provision for academy managers and the students. So what will be left in phase 2 if that's developed?
Effectively, they're changing rooms, showers. There is also the provision for the scholars to have an area of that building as well, and also there is also in one part of it their own physio facility. So the offices are in phase 1. Phase 2 is the grunt part of the job, I suppose, and that's why in theory it's just a single story, but it has the capability by the form of construction, should we ever have enough money, to put a second story on the top.
I think just to give you some numbers, there's 6 sets of changing rooms within that space, and 1 set for the scholars, and that's primarily around the visiting teams on particularly Sundays and Saturdays. So if another club come to play the academy, they'll often bring multiple age groups. So the idea is that you've got enough space for the visiting clubs and the home teams to change and be briefed ahead of the game, and then, as Mike said, the ancillary spaces for physio, storage, their own laundry facility. So it's a planned building that functions for the academy in terms of what the academy side of the club does, primarily around the weekends, changing, and obviously during the week in the evenings, etc.
Yeah, weekends and evenings is when it gets its most use, and I mean, there's plenty of people in here that've done an awful lot of work from the floors to the showers and so on. So it's of course the next phase, but a very important phase, because that's really where our 8-year-olds, some 7, 8, right the way through up to 15, 16. But what we are doing there is taking our young pros into a very, very professional building, which they haven't before. So something for them to aim at.
I should have said plus referees accommodation as well, and for the women's referees, as that side.
Got them outside in a tent, haven't we?
So.
So everything sounds really good. All the bits I've read indicate that the figures have been done on a case to minimise risk to the club, to take a very prudent view. So what is worst case scenario? We know that there's a bond there to protect us for part of it, but let's say the contractors go bust, the firm building it goes bust, we have unexpected expenses within the club. How do we finance that? How do we meet that situation? How do we make sure that we're protected and we don't end up where we've been before?
So as you say, and in the document that was sent out, there's a lot of detail in there about the cash and the assumptions and scenarios we've looked at. We've tried to de-risk this as much as we can as regards the finances and the current situation of the club's finances. What you're describing is a situation that we obviously we can't look at and we can't plan. If something unexpected happens, then we've got to try and manage that risk as it comes up. The cash balances of the club in the document that we sent out don't show that even taking into account all of the de-risk items, and it's very unlikely that all of those scenarios would happen. Maybe one or two might, but not all of them. But even if all of those did happen, the club has a cash level of no lower than £500,000. And the hope is that if any of these elements do happen, then within that we've got them covered. But as we explained earlier, and as David said, we have built into the contract significant areas where we have de-risked the contract as well. But it's impossible to say what is going to happen with businesses.
One is going to mitigate those risks as far as possible. From the trust point of view, if we commit this 600 grand to the project, if there was a call on the trust for some money, how does it leave us finance-wise as well?
How does it leave the trust finance-wise? Well,
So currently we have Steve, our finance officer, isn't here, I don't think, is he? I haven't seen. So we've got, thank you, Nigel. So we've got £800,000 sat in the bank. So we would potentially commit that 600 to this project. It would be secured. The reason we haven't worked out the security yet is simply because we don't know if it's needed. But we've got different options around that. So we would still have 200,000 with which to support the club should it need it.
I think importantly, the manager's been in the middle of the negotiations right the way through, so he understands exactly the questions you're asking. Literally everybody, we're all in it together. And I think from what we've done in the past with, phenomenal, I think it's something that I personally I don't think I would be sat here if I was not, I haven't done 20 years to see it fall on its face, and nor has anybody else. But I think even then, if there were to be an issue, we certainly have the wherewithal, and we have the experience in the people that we've got now that we didn't have then, which is far in advance of what we were dealing with 5 or 10 years ago, or even longer, to able to deal with any kind of mitigation issue. Look at what's happened during COVID. A lot of clubs are in absolutely desperate dire, but we're not. We're actually in a really, really strong place where loans and that kind of thing that have been offered, we haven't taken anything. And whereas a lot of clubs are, not all, but a number are. So I think we're very well run in that respect. And we're very, very conscious. The work that's gone into getting to this point, all those questions have been asked, not once, probably about 20 times, but it's exactly the questions you should be asking, and they have been thought through.
And talked about endlessly, I can assure you. And hopefully, we won't get to that point. Hopefully it won't be 600,000. But if it is, we've got the
Really good on all those answers. Just one other point connected to earlier about the lease. I agree with what was said. 25 years does seem, I know we've got security, a tenure and all these things. I don't know all the details of how that works. But to me, it seems 25 years doesn't give us a long period. It does seem that we would need something a bit longer to be sure of this investment that we're putting in and looking to protect and develop. And then one other question was, you talked about phase 2 as the academy bit, and I think a mention of a phase 3 or a further phase. I don't know what that was and whether that will have any impact on us.
Phase 3 originally was going to be the CCT buildings, but there's another option there now closer in the city, and that's probably not there now. So actually, whereas we did work with the 3 phases, there is only now 2. So the CCT, which was further out, now has another option, but that's another thing that, because it's being so successful across the city in the club's name, that it's expanding rapidly, and the area that they've got is something that needs to be looked at, which is something we are doing.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, it's not the same point really, but it's just worth adding the contractors paid on stage payments. There's no deposit arrangement with the contractor. So they get paid as they produce. You know, they're usually the money's in the banks a month after they've done the work. So primarily you've got a main contractor who's responsible for delivering the contract. The what we call the site works contractor, who does a lot of the work in the ground, is actually a more locally based, you know, Devon, Cornwall based company, likely to be. So it's not just the modular building contractor. They've got the overall contract responsibility. They are in legally binding contract with the club. But there are the local delivery of some of those services, and it's a reasonable chunk based on the site works that need to go in to put that building into place, and the demolition is delivered locally. And there's no deposit to the contractor. They're paid as they deliver the work. So one of our roles is to certify those payments to make sure that we're paying them appropriately and at the right points of the contract.
Would anybody else like to ask a question?
I did wait to see if there were any other questions, and there weren't. So could I just say from a personal perspective, I've been absolutely stunned by the level of communication. To receive a detailed cash flow in the message that came out first, I thought was really, really professional. The detail in the plans that came around, I thought was exceptionally professional. And I think today, and the speakers and the quality of the speakers, I think it's a testimony to what you're all trying to do. So personally, I'd like to say thank you very much.
That's a good time to finish, Nick, I think.
It is a good time good time. Quit while you're ahead. So while the guys prepare themselves, change a costume and that. Seriously, one last chance for any questions, and then we'll close it. Thank you so much for coming today. This is kind of supporter ownership in action, isn't it? It's really getting involved and really understanding what's happening at the club. So it's important. Thank you for coming along and supporting us. Thank you, Phil. So the ballots, you should all receive an email ballot. They're being sent out at 5 o'clock. I think they go out in batches so that they don't get mistaken as junk mail. And the ballot closes at 5 o'clock on Wednesday. So you've got a few days to mull it over, think about what you've seen. Any questions, please send them on to me, either to my personal email addresses, which many of you will have. Otherwise, inquiries at weownexetercityfc.co.uk or to CHTG@ecfcst.co.uk. You try remembering all of that. Look, thank you ever so much for coming. Thank you for your attention. And can I thank these guys at the front as well? And as always, thank you to the Phoenix for they let us have this place for free as a community offering. So if you're thirsty, please buy a coffee or a pint in the bar afterwards and help them out. They've had a tough year as well. Thank you ever so much.